Russia continues to shell Ukraine amid grinding push in east. Russian forces over the weekend continued to shell Ukrainian cities amid a grinding push to seize more land in the east of the country, with Ukrainian officials saying that Moscow is having trouble launching its much-anticipated large-scale offensive there. One person was killed and one more was wounded on Sunday morning by the shelling of Nikopol, a city in the southeastern Dnipropetrovsk region, Governor Serhiy Lysak reported. The shelling damaged 4 residential buildings, a vocational school and a water treatment facility. In Kharkiv, Ukraine's second-largest city, one person was wounded after 3 Russian S-300 missiles hit infrastructure facilities overnight, Regional Governor Ola Syniehubov said. Ukrainian forces also downed 5 drones, 4 Shahid killer drones and 1 Orlan-10 reconnaissance drone, over the partially occupied Zaporizhia and Donetsk regions on Saturday evening, Kyiv's military reported. The attacks come as Russian forces push to take over more land in the eastern industrial heartland of Donbass, comprised of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions. Ukrainian and Western officials have warned that Russia could launch a new, broad offensive there to try to turn the tide of the conflict as the war approaches the 1-year mark. But Ukrainian officials say that Moscow is having trouble mounting such an offensive. They are having big problems with a big offensive, Alexei Danilov, the Secretary of Ukraine's National Security and Defense Council, told Ukrainian television on Saturday night. They have begun their offensive, they're just not saying they have, and our troops are repelling it very powerfully. The offensive that they planned is already gradually underway. But it is not the offensive they were counting on, Danilov said. A US-based think tank noted that it is also Russia's pro-Kremlin military bloggers who question Moscow's ability to launch a broad offensive in Ukraine. They continue to appear demoralized at the Kremlin's prospects for executing a major offensive, the Institute for the Study of War said in its latest report. Earlier this week, the owner of the Russian Wagner Group private military contractor actively involved in the fighting in Ukraine said that the war could drag on for years. Yevgeny Prigozhin said in a video interview released late Friday that it could take 18 months to 2 years for Russia to fully secure control of Donbass. He added that the war could go on for 3 years if Moscow decides to capture broader territories east of the Dnieper River. The statement from Prigozhin, a millionaire who has close links to Russian President Vladimir Putin and was dubbed Putin's chef for his lucrative Kremlin catering contracts, marked a recognition of the difficulties that the Kremlin has faced in the campaign, which it initially expected to wrap up within weeks when Russian troops invaded Ukraine on February 24. Russia suffered a series of humiliating setbacks in the fall when the Ukrainian military launched successful counteroffensives to reclaim broad swaths of territory in the east and the south. On Sunday, Prigozhin said that Wagner fighters have taken over the Krasna Ora settlement north of Bakhmut, a strategic city at the epicenter of the fighting in recent months. Late on February 11, Russian forces struck the northeastern city of Kharkiv with missiles 3 times, damaging an infrastructure facility, Governor Ola Syniehubov said. According to preliminary data, Russia used S-300 surface-to-air missiles for the attack. Further details on the level of destruction and casualties are being clarified. The governor urged citizens to remain in shelters as the air raid alert is active in the region as of 11:45 p.m. The air raid alert is also active in Poltava, Sumy, Kirovohrad, Dnipropetrovsk, and Luhansk oblasts. The previous day, Russia unleashed another mass missile strike targeting Ukraine's critical infrastructure. The strike resulted in 8 injuries in Kharkiv Oblast, according to Ola Syniehubov. Russia attacked a key bridge in Ukraine's Odessa region, in what is understood to be Moscow's first use of a naval drone. Grainy surveillance footage from Friday night showed a fast-moving object slamming into the Zatoka bridge near the strategic port city before exploding. Ukraine's armed forces commander, Gen. Valery Zaluzhnyi, said he feared Russia's turn to using water-based uncrewed devices posed a threat to civilian shipping in the Black Sea. But military analysts said the more pressing consequences would be for Ukrainian naval strategy. Russia was not known to have these types of drones, or to think in these terms, said H.I. Sutton, a defense analyst and open-source intelligence reporter, adding that the strike posed a major new threat for Ukraine. He said, if Russia is able to use these explosive drones against Ukrainian coastal targets, but Ukraine can no longer attack Russian warships in the same way, we may see another shift in the war in the Black Sea. This time in Russia's favor again. The bridge, which was targeted by Russian missile strikes early in the war, serves the rail line to Romania, which is a key conduit for Western arms supplies. Ukraine did not acknowledge the strike until around 24 hours later when Jen Zaluzhnyi said he had shared his concerns in a call with U.S. Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, JCS, Mark Milley. The JCS did not immediately respond to a request for comment from The Independent. The Kremlin's Ministry of Defense did not comment on the use of naval drones, but Russian military bloggers said Moscow began developing such munitions after finding a Ukrainian uncrewed boat off the coast of Crimea in September. Igor Korochenko, a retired colonel of the Russian armed forces who frequently comments on the conflict on Russian state TV, said on Saturday that such drones should be equipped with a more powerful load of explosives to inflict more significant damage. The strike came as Ukrainian officials said a long-anticipated Russian offensive had begun in the eastern Donbas region. But Ukraine's military intelligence spokesperson, Andriy Chernyak, told the Kyiv Post that Russian command does not have enough resources for large-scale offensive actions. Russia launched the 14th round of massive strikes on Ukrainian energy facilities and other vital infrastructure on Friday. High-voltage infrastructure facilities were hit in the east, west and south of Ukraine, resulting in power outages in some areas, continuing Moscow's efforts to break the spirit of Ukrainian civilians by leaving them without heat and water in the bitter winter. Ukraine's energy company, Ukrenergo, said that the situation was difficult but controllable, adding that power rationing would continue in some areas. Meanwhile, the owner of the Wagner group of mercenaries fighting with Russia predicted that the war could drag on for years. Yevgeny Prigozhin said in a video interview released late on Friday that it could take 18 months to 2 years for Russia to fully secure control of Ukraine's eastern industrial heartland of Donbas. He added that the war could go on for 3 years if Moscow decided to capture broader territories east of the Dnipro River. Seizing Russian assets is easier said than done. The idea is seductively simple. The West should turn over billions of dollars of frozen Russian assets to Ukraine to fund reconstruction. But it faces major legal problems which mean little progress has been made. After the Kremlin's invasion of Ukraine last February, unprecedented economic sanctions against Moscow saw an estimated $350 billion in state assets, foreign reserves and oligarch property frozen by Western banks and officials. Nearly 12 months on, politicians and campaigners in the West are pushing for this idle wealth to be put to work rebuilding the shattered infrastructure, homes and businesses destroyed during Russia's aggression. So much damage has been done and the country that did the damage should pay, Canadian Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland told an audience at the World Economic Forum last month. In December, Canada began proceedings for the first time to turn over around $26 million belonging to a sanctioned company owned by oligarch Roman Abramovich, something Russia's ambassador likened to robbery in broad daylight. Earlier this month, the European Commission pledged to step up its work towards the use of Russia's frozen assets to support Ukraine's reconstruction. Poland and 3 Baltic states pressed publicly for action as soon as possible. Estonia has announced plans to be a frontrunner in the EU, drawing up its own confiscation plans. Putin broke it, he should fix it, former U.S. investor and activist Bill Browder, a dogged campaigner against the Kremlin, told AFP in a recent interview. The man behind the Magnitsky Act, pioneering legislation to sanction Russian government officials involved in human rights abuses, is now seeking to build pressure on lawmakers. There are 50 different alternative proposals for how to do it. And if you want to make sure that something never gets done, present 50 different proposals, Browder said. The U.S. Congress has been holding hearings on ways in which U.S. law could be changed to enable permanent seizures, although President Joe Biden's administration has been publicly cautious about the idea. Proceeds of crime. Legal experts make a distinction between private assets frozen by Western governments such as an oligarch's yacht and state property, such as the foreign currency reserves of Russia's central bank. In the case of private assets, legal safeguards mean Western states are permitted to permanently seize them only in very limited circumstances, usually when they can be proven to be the proceeds of crime. And even though Russian oligarchs operate in the murky weeds of Russian capitalism, we don't really know that the properties that have been frozen are the proceeds of crime, Anton Moisenko from the Australian National University told AFP. Seizing them poses a challenge to fundamental legal and human rights, such as the right to property, protection from arbitrary punishment, or the right to a free trial. The West's public commitment to respecting the rule of law would also be on the line. How are you going to prove that the seized assets, constitute the proceeds of crime without the cooperation of Russia? Moiseenko, an international law expert, added. Other problems arise due to bilateral or international investment treaties signed with Russia, potentially exposing states to legal claims in international arbitration courts further down the line. Canada so far is the only state so far to take what Moiseenko calls a uniquely aggressive approach. It will be interesting to see how it plays out in court, he added. State assets such as central bank reserves pose different but equally knotty problems because they are covered by so-called sovereign immunity, an understanding that one state will not seize another's property. Western central banks such as the Federal Reserve, the European Central Bank or the Bank of Japan are thought to have blocked reserves worth around $300 billion held with them by Russia. The customary international law of state immunity generally protects state assets from seizure, Paul B. Stephen wrote in the Capital Markets Law Journal last June in a review of existing legislation. Exceptions exist, but their scope is unclear, he added. A lively debate has taken place between scholars since Russia's invasion about the circumstances under which Western states could invest assets such as central bank reserves. Some have invoked the international law of countermeasures, which holds that one state can impose costs on another when it is acting outside the bounds of international law. But so-called countermeasures are meant to be reversible. Many lawyers believe Ukraine's best chance of compensation is to try to force a favorable agreement to end the fighting, which would include reparations, which it is entitled to under international law. But others argue for a more radical approach which would send a message to other states, including China. Russia continues to close in on Bakhmut, claiming capture of nearby town. The head of Russia's paramilitary Wagner Group said on Sunday that his troops had taken the Ukrainian town of Krasnohora, a few kilometers north of Bakhmut, a key city that Moscow has been trying to conquer for several months. Today, Wagner's assault units took the locality of Krasnohora, Yevgeny Prigozhin was quoted as saying by his press service. For more than 6 months, Wagner and the Russian army have been trying to capture Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine, a town of limited strategic importance but which has gained great symbolic significance because of the long duration of the fighting. Russian forces have been trying to encircle the city for the past few weeks. They have managed to cut off several roads that are vital for the supply of Ukrainian troops. However, there appears to be increasing tensions between the paramilitary group and Moscow-Euro's regular forces. The Wagner Group announced on January 11 that it had taken Soledar, a larger town not far from Krasnohora. But the Russian Defense Ministry took 2 days to announce the capture of Soledar, suggesting a level of discord between Wagner and the regular Russian army.